She raised their daughter alone for 6 years, then, on the first day of school, she saw him standing by the gates, alive. The morning air was crisp and clear, the kind that hinted at the end of summer and the quiet arrival of fall. Sunlight spilled across the sidewalks as parents and children filled the streets near the school, laughter and nervous chatter blending into the warm hum of a new beginning. Lauren gripped her daughter's hand a little tighter than usual, her palm slightly damp with emotion she didn't want to show. Today was Emma's first day of school, the beginning of a chapter Lauren had once feared she'd have to face entirely alone. Emma skipped beside her, her blonde curls bouncing with each step. Her light blue backpack, almost as big as her tiny frame, swung side to side. She looked up with bright blue eyes that mirrored the sky and, unknowingly, mirrored a face Lauren had tried to forget. The resemblance was uncanny. From the color of her eyes to the curve of her lips, Emma was his child, even if he'd never known it. Lauren had raised her daughter without him, through every illness, every birthday, every late-night nightmare. And now, 6 years later, she was walking her into the world, a world he had chosen not to be part of. As they reached the front gate, Emma let go of Lauren's hand to twirl in her dress, excited by the decorations and balloons that surrounded the school entrance. Lauren smiled, then knelt to fix a stray hair behind her daughter's ear, steadying her own emotions. "You're going to do great," she said softly. "Be kind, be brave, and have fun." Emma nodded seriously, then wrapped her arms around her mother's neck in a sudden hug. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you more," Lauren whispered into her ear, holding on just a second longer. When she finally stood up, brushing her hands over her jeans, her heart full of pride and a quiet ache, she lifted her eyes, and froze. Across the courtyard, just past the line of parents taking photos and saying rushed goodbyes, stood a man. Tall. Blonde. Blue-eyed. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, blending in easily with the crowd. But he didn't blend in for Lauren. Her breath caught. Her legs locked in place. Her mind rejected the image at first, then scrambled to make sense of it. It couldn't be. It was. Alex Reeves. The man who had vanished from her life without warning, without goodbye, without explanation. The man who had held her once like he never wanted to let her go, and then did. The man who had left her to navigate pregnancy, labor, and motherhood completely alone. He wasn't looking around casually. He was staring directly at her. And then, his gaze shifted, slowly, hesitantly, to the small girl standing beside her. His entire body stilled. His face changed, melted from surprise into something deeper. Recognition. Shock. Guilt. Emma turned to see what her mother was staring at. Her eyes followed the line of sight and landed on the stranger. She tilted her head, curious but unfazed. "That man looks like me," she said cheerfully. Lauren blinked hard. Her voice came out thin. "He's no one." But he wasn't no one. He was everything she'd worked to forget. And now, on the most important day of her daughter's young life, he had appeared out of nowhere like a ghost. She grabbed Emma's hand gently, her pulse roaring in her ears, and turned away without a word. Her legs moved fast, her thoughts even faster. She didn't know why he was there, how he had found them, or what he wanted. But one thing was certain, he had already changed everything, just by standing there. Lauren didn't remember the drive home. Her body had gone on autopilot, walking Emma through the gates, kissing her cheek, smiling for the teacher with more composure than she thought possible. The whole time, Alex's face lingered behind her eyelids, stunned, pale, familiar in a way that sent chills down her spine. Once home, she sat in silence at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee between her hands, staring at nothing. The clock ticked louder than usual. Her mind replayed every detail of the morning in agonizing loops. 6 years. 6 years of wondering, hating, healing, building. 6 years of silence. And then, just like that, he was there. She didn't know what had shaken her more, seeing Alex again after so long or the look in his eyes when he saw Emma. It wasn't indifference. It wasn't confusion. It was something far more dangerous, recognition. And now, all the questions she had buried long ago were resurfacing with full force. Why now? Why here? What did he want? She stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a sharp screech, and began pacing the kitchen. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he didn't even know she lived in this town, that Emma existed. But then she remembered the way his gaze had locked onto her child, the way he didn't move or look away. No, this wasn't accidental. Lauren had spent years imagining what she would do if she ever saw him again. In those imaginary encounters, she was strong, fiery, fearless. She would demand answers, tell him exactly how he broke her, how he left her to face the impossible alone. But reality had stolen her words. When it actually happened, she hadn't said anything at all. She had walked away. 6 years earlier, she had been someone else entirely. She was 24, working in a midtown publishing house, full of hope and ambition. Meeting Alex felt like a twist of fate. He wasn't just charming and successful, he was thoughtful, magnetic in a way that made everything else fade when he entered the room. Their connection had been instant and intense. He had told her he had no interest in shallow relationships, that he wanted something real. She believed him. For a while, it was real. Until the night he didn't come home. Until the morning she found her messages unread, her calls unanswered, and his apartment completely empty. Not a note. Not a goodbye. Just gone. For weeks, she tried to find him. Called every number. Wrote emails. Nothing bounced back, but nothing was returned either. Eventually, friends told her he'd left the country for business, but there were no details. No one seemed to know anything concrete. It was like he had vanished from the face of the earth. And just as she started to accept that he had simply ghosted her, she missed a period. Then another. The pregnancy test glared positive, and with it, every plan she had for her future shattered. Lauren remembered sitting on the bathroom floor, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter, her heart pounding with a cocktail of fear and disbelief. She was alone. Completely, truly alone. Her parents had been shocked, disappointed. Her job became unbearable with morning sickness and whispers behind her back. She left New York before her third trimester and moved to a town no one had ever heard of, found work in a local library, and rented a small house with a leaky roof and creaky floors. She gave birth in a small hospital with no one holding her hand. She chose the name Emma herself, based on a childhood storybook she loved. She was there for the first laugh, the first step, the first fever. And Alex? He had missed it all. And now he was back. Lauren walked into the living room and pulled an old photo album from the shelf, one she hadn't opened in years. She flipped through it, Emma's baby pictures, her first birthday, her gap-toothed smile at 3, the first time she held a crayon. No father in any photo. No man behind the camera. Every image a quiet testament to how hard Lauren had worked to create a life out of nothing. A life of love. A life of strength. A life without him. As the sky darkened and the evening crept in, Lauren sat by the window, arms wrapped around her knees, still gripping the photo album. She knew this wasn't over. He had found them. Whether by accident or design, he had seen Emma, and that meant he would be back. Her instincts told her he wasn't the type to disappear twice. She should be angry, furious, even. But under the rage was something worse, a tremor of fear. Fear that Emma would ask questions Lauren wasn't ready to answer. Fear that Alex would come back and try to be something he had no right to be. But the worst fear of all, the one she didn't want to name, was that a small, stubborn part of her had wanted to see him again. That part had never really let him go. She buried her face in her hands, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up to her. Tomorrow, she would be ready. She would ask the questions. She would make it clear where the lines were. But tonight, all she could do was sit in the silence, the same silence that had followed his disappearance, and wait for whatever came next. The morning sun broke through the sheer curtains, casting soft golden patterns on the living room walls, but Lauren didn't feel any warmth. She had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alex's face, exactly as she remembered it and yet somehow changed. Older, maybe. A little more weathered around the eyes. He had always been beautiful in that effortless, unattainable way, but now there was something else, something quieter. Still, no amount of years could erase the sting of what he had done, and no change in appearance could wash away the memories of how he left. She watched the clock on the wall while brushing Emma's hair into two little braids. Emma was talking about school again, rambling happily about the games the kids played during recess, about a girl named Mia who had shared her crayons, and a boy who brought a frog to class in his backpack. Lauren responded when needed, nodding, smiling, but her mind was far away. Emma, in her innocence, hadn't asked about the man at the school gate yesterday. She had only commented on how he looked like her, then had gone right back to skipping along as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Lauren knew it had been extraordinary. Earth-shifting, even. Because the moment she looked at Alex, the life she'd built, the one she'd fought so hard to protect, began to tremble beneath her. After dropping Emma off, Lauren sat in her car for a while, hands resting on the wheel, unsure of what she was even waiting for. A sign? A plan? Some burst of clarity? None came. Eventually, she started the engine and drove to the small cafe near the center of town. She ordered a coffee she didn't want and took it to a quiet table in the corner, hoping the ritual of normalcy might help her brain settle. It didn't. She kept looking at the door. She didn't expect him to walk in. And yet, part of her prepared for it. When she returned home, there was a manila envelope propped carefully against her front door. No note. No handwriting. She hesitated before picking it up, her fingers tingling with the anticipation of something inevitable. Inside were documents, old hospital records, photographs, printed boarding passes from 6 years ago, medical charts with Alex's name on them. She scanned them quickly, her eyes wide. Coma. Severe head trauma. Multiple fractures. Surgery. She dropped the envelope and sank onto the couch, pressing her hands to her mouth. None of this made sense. It couldn't be true. He had left her. He had vanished. He had made no attempt to reach her, or so she believed. But the records told a different story. They painted a picture not of betrayal, but of tragedy. Later that afternoon, she heard a knock on the door. It was quiet, tentative. Her pulse jumped as she opened it, already knowing who would be there. Alex stood on her porch, wearing a dark blue sweater, his expression unreadable. He looked more vulnerable now, less like the polished executive she once knew and more like a man who had been stripped of everything and was still trying to piece himself back together. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "I just wanted you to know the truth." She didn't say anything. Not yet. "I didn't leave you," he continued, his voice breaking just slightly. "I was in a car accident 3 days after I last saw you. I don't remember most of it. When I woke up, months had passed. I was in a hospital in Switzerland. My phone was destroyed in the crash. I had no contacts. No memory of passwords or backup accounts. By the time I recovered, the company was under someone else's control. Everything I had, my identity, my access to the outside world, was gone. Still, she said nothing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photograph. It was worn at the edges, faded from being held too often. It was the photo they had taken together in Central Park, one of the only ones they ever had. They had been sitting on a bench, laughing, unaware of the camera. She had forgotten that picture even existed. "I carried this the whole time," he said. "Even when I couldn't remember my own name for a while, I remembered yours. I remembered that moment. I tried to find you. I did. But everything I tried led to nothing. I finally tracked you here 2 weeks ago." Lauren's head spun. Her instinct had always been to guard, to protect what she had built with her bare hands. But now, holding the weight of his story, she felt the foundations of her assumptions start to shift. What if he had truly been lost? Not just emotionally, but physically, violently cut off from the life they had started to build? She finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "Do you know how many nights I stayed up wondering what I did wrong? Do you know what it's like to carry a child alone, knowing her father disappeared without a trace? I thought you made a choice. I thought I wasn't enough for you to stay." His eyes brimmed with something between guilt and grief. "You were everything. I never would have left you." Silence stretched between them, heavy and strange. She could still smell the scent of his cologne, faint but familiar. She could still hear echoes of the way he once whispered to her in the middle of the night, how he dreamed of having a daughter someday, how he loved the sound of her laughter more than any applause he ever got in boardrooms. Emma. She was the bridge between what was and what now stood before her. A child born of love, raised in the absence of it, and now unknowingly at the center of a story neither of them had finished writing. Lauren didn't know what came next. She didn't know if she could ever fully forgive, or fully understand. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. Not anymore. The days that followed moved with a strange kind of weight, like time had thickened. Lauren went through the motions of her daily life, waking up, making breakfast, walking Emma to school, answering polite questions from coworkers at the library, but her mind was elsewhere, constantly pulled back to the conversation on the porch and the man who had once been her entire future. Nothing about Alex's story fit into the narrative she had clung to for 6 years. He hadn't ghosted her out of cruelty or fear. He had been torn away, lost to an accident that changed everything, not just for him but for her and for Emma too. And now that he was back, she no longer knew where she stood. He hadn't contacted her again. Not yet. And that unsettled her in ways she couldn't explain. Part of her had expected him to knock again the next day, to press harder, to try and insert himself into her life like nothing had happened. But he hadn't. He had told his truth and then stepped back, almost as if he knew she needed space, or maybe as if he was just as afraid as she was of what would happen next. It was a kind of restraint she hadn't expected, and it only made everything more complicated. Emma, meanwhile, was still blissfully unaware of the tension brewing just beneath the surface. She continued to chatter about school, proudly show off her drawings, and fall asleep in Lauren's arms while holding her favorite stuffed animal. But now Lauren noticed little things she hadn't seen before. Emma had his eyes, yes, but also his stubborn way of raising one eyebrow when she was confused, his exact laugh when something surprised her, his quiet pause before answering a difficult question. And it hurt in a new way to realize how much he had already been a part of their daughter without ever being there. Lauren stayed up late one night, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark with a cup of tea she never touched. The silence of the house wrapped around her, pressing in. She opened her laptop and pulled up a blank document, thinking maybe writing it all out would help. She started typing questions, trying to be logical, detached. Why did he never send someone to find her? Why did it take 6 years to appear? Was there really no way he could have reached out sooner? But for every question she typed, she found herself deleting it seconds later, because no answer would change the fact that she had raised a child alone, and no excuse, no matter how honest, could undo that pain. But still, the image of him on the porch haunted her. He had looked tired, not physically, but soul-tired, like a man who had carried regret like a second skin. And that look in his eyes when he saw Emma, it hadn't been forced or performative. It had been real. The next morning, Lauren did something she didn't quite understand herself. She left a note with the school office. It was short, simple. "If you want to talk again, meet me at the park near the bookstore at 5. She didn't sign it. She didn't even know if he would see it. But a part of her needed to know if he would come. At 5 o'clock exactly, he was there. He stood by the fountain, hands in his coat pockets, watching the water ripple in the breeze. When he saw her, he straightened, not stepping forward immediately, as if waiting to be sure she wanted him there. She walked toward him, slower than she needed to, still unsure what she would say. "Thanks for coming," she said finally, her voice more calm than she felt. "Thank you for asking me to," he replied. They sat on a nearby bench, and for a moment neither spoke. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp leaves, and the sky above them was painted in fading gold. "I read everything you left," she began. "The records. The photos. The details." She glanced at him. "I don't know what to do with any of it. It's like I lived one story and now suddenly someone's telling me it was a different book the whole time." "I know," he said quietly. "And I don't expect you to just rewrite it overnight." "I don't want to hate you," she said, and the honesty of it surprised her. "I've tried to hold on to that anger because it made things easier. But now I don't even know where to put it." Alex leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want to be part of her life, if there's any way I can. I missed everything. Her birth. Her first steps. I'll never get those moments back, and I'll never pretend that I deserve them. But I want to earn the ones ahead." Lauren looked away, blinking quickly. "You don't know her yet. She's more than you realize." "I want to know her," he said. "All of her." "She calls you the man with her eyes," Lauren whispered. "That's all you are to her right now." He gave a faint, broken smile. "That's more than I ever thought I'd get." They sat in silence again, the kind that wasn't exactly comfortable but wasn't painful either. It was the silence of two people standing at the edge of something they weren't ready to name. Lauren finally stood, brushing her hands over the front of her coat. "If you want to try, you'll do it on my terms. Slowly. Carefully. If she ever gets hurt because of this, I swear I won't hold back." He rose as well, nodding with quiet conviction. "You have my word." As she walked away, she didn't look back. But her steps were slower than before. And her heart, though still heavy, felt just a little less alone. It started with small things. Lauren didn't plan a formal introduction, didn't sit Emma down and explain that the man from school, the one with the same eyes and the quiet voice, was her father. She didn't have the strength to answer the questions that might follow, or the words to describe what had really happened between her and Alex, not in a way a 6-year-old would understand. But children have a way of sensing truth even when it isn't spoken out loud. They know when the air in a room has changed, when their mother looks at someone a moment too long, or when an adult's voice is weighed down by something unsaid. Emma saw Alex again the following week at the park. It wasn't planned, at least not on her part. Lauren had agreed to meet him for a short walk, still guarded, still unsure if she was making a mistake. She hadn't told Emma that he would be there. But when the little girl saw him sitting on the bench by the pond, her face lit up with innocent recognition. "There's the man with my eyes," she whispered. Lauren tensed but said nothing. She let Emma walk over, let the moment unfold naturally. Alex stood when he saw them, visibly nervous. He looked at Emma like she was something fragile and priceless, and Lauren noticed the way his hands remained at his sides, careful not to reach for her too soon. Emma stared at him for a long moment before finally speaking. "You came back." Lauren's heart froze. Alex crouched down slowly to be at eye level. "I did." "Where were you?" The question hit harder than Lauren expected, and she could see it land just as sharply on Alex. He didn't flinch. He didn't lie. "I was hurt for a long time," he said. "I couldn't come. But I wanted to. I missed everything, and I'm sorry." Emma nodded as if considering this, then turned to Lauren. "Can we show him the ducks?" And just like that, it began. The next hour passed in strange, quiet ease. Emma held Alex's hand, only for a few moments, but Lauren noticed. She showed him her favorite bench, her favorite tree with the low branch she liked to climb. He listened as if it were the most important tour of his life. He didn't try too hard. He didn't interrupt or perform. He just listened. And Lauren found herself watching him more than she wanted to. Watching how naturally he fit into this moment that should have felt foreign. In the days that followed, Alex became a quiet presence in their lives. Lauren didn't open the door wide, but she didn't shut it either. He came to the park on Saturdays, sometimes joined them at the bookstore, occasionally walked them home from school if she agreed. He brought no gifts, no grand gestures. Only patience. Only time. And Emma warmed to him, slowly but surely. She began asking questions, not in a rush, but with the curiosity only a child could carry without bitterness. "What's your favorite color? Do you know how to whistle? Did you ever have a dog?" Alex answered everything. When he didn't know something, he said so. When she asked why he didn't know her favorite song or her favorite bedtime story, he told her gently, "Because I missed too much. But if you tell me now, I'll never forget again." Lauren didn't expect the ache that came with watching them. She thought it would be anger, maybe jealousy, but it was something deeper. Regret. Not just for what she lost, but for what Emma had never known she missed. Her daughter had learned to be brave, to laugh, to grow strong without a father. But now, with Alex near, something softened in her. She became even more open, more expressive. She started drawing pictures of "the man with my eyes," and later began writing his name on them without asking for permission. One rainy evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch with a book still clutched in her hands, Lauren and Alex found themselves in the kitchen, standing side by side, not speaking. She was making tea, and he was drying the dishes, a domestic rhythm that felt too natural for how much time had passed. "She's incredible," he said at last. "You did all of this." "I don't know how." Lauren exhaled slowly. "I didn't have a choice." "I know," he said. "But it still amazes me." She turned to look at him, leaning against the counter, her expression unreadable. "You're doing well now. I've seen the articles. Your name is back in the headlines." Alex nodded. "It doesn't mean what it used to." "Then why are you really here, Alex? Is it guilt? Obligation?" His voice was steady, but his eyes were raw. "Because I woke up in a hospital and couldn't remember my name, but I remembered yours. Because I opened my eyes in that place and the only thing I could think about was that I never got to tell you goodbye. And because now that I've found you, found her, I can't walk away again." Lauren didn't answer. She poured the tea. She handed him a cup. And then she said, almost too quietly, "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not completely. Not yet." "I don't expect you to," he said. I just want to be worth forgiving someday." They stood there in the quiet, two people who had once fallen in love in a whirlwind of weeks and were now picking through the wreckage of lost time. It wasn't healing. Not yet. But it was no longer silence. And somehow, that was enough to begin. Autumn settled into the town with the kind of gentleness that only deepened Lauren's sense of uncertainty. Leaves painted in gold and rust drifted along the sidewalks, and the air smelled like rain and burning wood. Lauren found herself walking more slowly in the mornings, letting Emma jump through piles of leaves while she stood quietly nearby, watching the world unfold. Alex had become part of their routine in ways that felt so natural it frightened her. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected him to fit so easily into the cracks of the life she'd spent 6 years building without him. And now that he was there, really there, she didn't know how to feel. What unsettled her most was how easily Emma trusted him. Children were supposed to be wary of strangers, weren't they? But Emma hadn't been. Not with him. She had welcomed him into their world without hesitation, as if something inside her had recognized what Lauren had tried for years to bury. Her daughter's growing affection for Alex brought with it a quiet ache, the kind of pain Lauren didn't know how to name. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was grief for time lost, for birthdays spent without him, for scraped knees he hadn't kissed, for songs and stories she had whispered alone in the dark. He had missed all of it. And yet here he was, gathering the pieces of what he'd never held in the first place, and somehow doing it with care. One Friday afternoon, Emma came home from school with a drawing clutched tightly in her small hand. She had drawn the three of them, herself, Lauren, and Alex, standing in front of a house with a garden, holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. "This is our family," she said proudly. "It's not finished yet. I still need to draw the puppy." Lauren stared at the picture longer than she meant to. Emma beamed up at her, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing behind her mother's eyes. And when Emma went to bed that night, Lauren sat at the edge of her mattress for nearly an hour, brushing the hair from her daughter's forehead, wondering how a child so young could so easily rewrite what Lauren had spent years learning to live without. The next evening, Lauren invited Alex for dinner. It was casual, or at least, it was supposed to be. She made roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, nothing fancy, but enough to make the house smell warm and full. Emma sat next to Alex at the table and told him all about her science project and how she had named her class plant Mr. Leafy. Alex laughed the way he always did with her, not performative or exaggerated, but with a softness Lauren couldn't ignore. She watched them together and tried not to let her emotions show. This was what Emma had never had. This was what Lauren had sworn she didn't need to give her. And yet now it was here, this domestic, gentle version of a life she had once imagined and then buried. After Emma went to bed, Lauren and Alex sat in the living room with mugs of tea that neither of them touched. The quiet between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was full of things unsaid, of emotions neither of them quite knew how to articulate. Finally, Lauren turned to him, her eyes steady, her voice low. "She calls you Dad when I'm not around." Alex swallowed. "I didn't tell her to. I promise." "I know you didn't," she said. "She chose it. That's what scares me." He looked at her, confused. "Why would that scare you?" "Because I didn't choose any of this," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "You left. Whether it was your fault or not, you were gone. I raised her on my own. I made every decision, every sacrifice. And now she sees you and thinks this is what it's always supposed to have been. Like you were always here. Like nothing was missing." Alex sat back slowly, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy coat. "I know I don't deserve her love. Or yours. I can't make up for the past. But I'm not here to erase it either. I'm here because I finally can be. Because I want to be." And because I don't want her to grow up wondering why her father didn't try." Lauren's voice cracked, quiet and raw. "You don't get to try and fail again, Alex. That little girl, she's not a second chance. She's not your redemption arc. She's a person. She's my whole world. If you hurt her, I won't forgive you. I don't care how tragic your story is." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. "I'm not going anywhere. I can't change the past, but I'm not running from the responsibility now. I'm not trying to redeem myself. I just want to love her. And be the man you needed back then, even if it's too late for us." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy with resentment or grief. It was something else, something like possibility, as fragile and delicate as glass. Lauren didn't know what she believed anymore. But she believed in Emma. And if Emma saw something in him worth holding on to, then maybe Lauren owed it to her daughter to stop holding so tightly to the past. Later that night, after Alex left, Lauren stood in the hallway outside Emma's room, staring at the drawing still pinned to the fridge. Their family. Not finished yet. And maybe that was okay. Maybe some families didn't start the way they were supposed to. Maybe some families had to break before they could be rebuilt. But if there was still love, real, present, imperfect love, then maybe they still had a chance. The following weeks passed with a rhythm Lauren hadn't known she needed. It wasn't peace, not exactly. But it was a kind of forward movement, slow and uncertain, like stepping across a frozen lake and hoping the ice would hold. Alex remained present without pushing, consistent without demanding. He learned when to speak and when to be quiet, when to offer help and when to let Lauren handle things the way she always had. More importantly, he learned to simply exist in Emma's world, not as a stranger or a symbol of regret, but as someone who showed up, again and again, without promise or fanfare. He became a quiet constant, the man waiting at the edge of the playground, the one who remembered to pack an extra juice box on field trip days, the one who knew which songs Emma sang to herself when she thought no one was listening. It was around that time Lauren began to feel something she hadn't allowed herself in years: exhaustion. Not from parenting or working, not from surviving, but from the emotional armor she had kept strapped to her for so long. For 6 years, she had carried everything on her shoulders, hardened herself to disappointment, buried her softness so deeply she feared it might never return. But now, with Alex near, not perfect, but present, the weight of those years started to catch up to her. She began to feel tired in a different way, like her body was realizing it was finally safe to let go of the tension it had held onto for far too long. One cold Saturday morning, Lauren stood at the window, watching as Alex helped Emma build a snowman in the yard. Emma was bundled in a puffy blue coat and mismatched gloves, laughing uncontrollably as Alex kept adding pine cones for buttons and rearranging the crooked carrot nose. It was such a simple moment, and yet it pulled something in Lauren's chest so tightly she had to grip the windowsill just to steady herself. She didn't want to cry, but the tears came anyway, not out of sadness, but from the quiet terror of realizing how much she had missed this kind of ease. This kind of shared joy. She had protected Emma with everything she had, but maybe in doing so, she had also protected herself from ever feeling this kind of hope again. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Alex stayed a little longer. They sat on the couch with hot cocoa that quickly went cold, and for the first time in weeks, Lauren spoke without filtering herself. She told him about the early days after he disappeared, about the fear, the hospital bills, the long nights awake while Emma cried and Lauren didn't know how to soothe her because she was breaking herself. She told him about the job she had taken out of desperation, the months they had lived off canned soup and anxiety, and the time she had taken Emma to the emergency room with a fever so high she could barely think, and how she had prayed to a God she wasn't even sure she believed in because she had no one else to call. Alex sat in silence, not trying to interrupt, not trying to explain away the pain. He just listened, his face open and aching, his hands clenched together in his lap as if holding them still would keep him from falling apart. When she finished, her voice cracked and dry, he looked at her with an expression that nearly undid her all over again. "I don't deserve to ask," he said, voice hoarse, "but can I say something?" She nodded slowly. "I've thought about that time every day," he said. "Even when I couldn't remember your name or where I was, I felt it, this hole in me where you and Emma should have been. And when my memory came back, when I finally knew what I had lost, I wanted to run back, but there was nothing to run back to. I was too late. Every moment I've had with her now, they're miracles to me, Lauren. Every laugh, every question. I don't take any of it for granted. But I know I'm still on the outside of what you two have. And maybe I always will be." She looked at him for a long moment, her heart caught between anger and forgiveness. "It's not about letting you in," she said carefully. "It's about seeing if you stay." He didn't promise that he would. He didn't make some dramatic vow or try to win her over with words. He just nodded, slow, quiet, certain. And in that nod, Lauren saw something she hadn't let herself believe in for a long time: stability. Not perfection. Not romance. Just someone who meant it. But the world has a cruel sense of timing. Because the next morning, Lauren opened her email to find a message that made her entire body tense. It was from a reporter, a woman named Caroline Tate, who claimed to be writing an exposé on Alex's mysterious 6-year disappearance. She referenced anonymous sources, mentioned rumors of scandal, offshore accounts, and whispered speculation that Alex's accident had been part of a larger cover-up orchestrated by former executives in his company. Lauren read the email twice, then 3 more times, her hands shaking. None of it made sense. It sounded like a conspiracy theory, the kind of thing you'd find buried in a forum thread, but the tone was professional, direct, and, most terrifying of all, informed. The reporter wanted a comment. She wanted Lauren's side of the story. She wanted to know what Alex had told her and what Emma knew. Panic rose in Lauren like a wave. She thought they were past the worst. She thought they were finally getting somewhere. But now the past, twisted, exaggerated, and weaponized, was knocking at her door again. She stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like a threat, and realized something she hadn't admitted until that moment: she had started to hope. She had let herself imagine a future that didn't end in heartbreak. And now, she didn't know if that hope had been a mistake. Lauren didn't respond to the email right away. She closed her laptop, walked out of the room, and paced the length of her small kitchen for nearly half an hour, trying to quiet the noise in her head. The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as she had started to let her guard down, just as she had begun to imagine that maybe their story wasn't doomed to end in pieces, the past, or someone's twisted version of it, had come clawing back to the surface. The idea of a reporter sniffing around not only threatened Alex's already delicate position in their lives, but it also risked exposing Emma to questions and attention she was far too young to navigate. And that terrified Lauren more than anything else. She didn't tell Alex that night. She couldn't. Not with Emma just down the hall, not with their house full of quiet and warmth. He had come over to help Emma paint her Halloween costume, and watching the two of them covered in glitter and glue, laughing over how crooked the wings looked, Lauren couldn't bring herself to break that fragile peace. But it weighed on her. She barely slept, her mind caught in loops of what-ifs. What if the story ran? What if old investors or enemies twisted it further? What if this reporter knew something they didn't? The line between reality and fear blurred until everything felt like a threat. The next morning, she told him. They were standing outside the coffee shop near the bookstore where they sometimes met on Sundays, away from Emma, away from distractions. She showed him the email, the journalist's name, the thinly veiled threat beneath her polite words. Alex went still as he read, his jaw tightening with every line. When he finished, He closed his eyes for a moment like he was grounding himself, then handed the phone back to her. "I've seen her name before," he said. "She's aggressive. She's known for digging up old scandals and spinning them into something new. She's tried to contact my lawyers before, back when I reappeared. We ignored her then, but maybe that was a mistake." Lauren folded her arms tightly. What if she runs the story anyway? What if people come knocking on our door? On Emma's school? Alex looked at her with something fierce and quiet in his expression. "Then we protect her. Together. We don't run, we don't hide. I'll take the heat. I'll do every interview. But you and Emma stay out of it." But Lauren shook her head. "That's not how it works anymore. You're not some man from our past. You're in her life now. That means what they say about you, they'll say about her." Alex didn't argue. He knew she was right. The following days were tense. Alex contacted his lawyer. He crafted a public statement preemptively, something carefully worded but honest. He admitted to the accident, the memory loss, the lost years, the search for his identity. He left out Lauren and Emma's names entirely, protecting them as best he could. They agreed to sit tight and see what the reporter would do. But instead of publishing a bombshell piece, Caroline Tate requested a meeting. She emailed again, this time softer in tone, claiming she wasn't looking for a scandal, only the truth. Against every instinct, Lauren agreed to speak with her, privately, without Emma or Alex present. She wanted to look this woman in the eyes and understand what she was after. They met at a small cafe downtown. Caroline was poised, sharp-eyed, and disarmingly polite. She didn't dive into accusations. She asked questions like a friend might. When did you first hear he was alive? How did Emma react to meeting him? Do you believe he was truly gone all that time? Lauren answered carefully. She told her the truth, but not the whole truth. She didn't cry. She didn't defend him or condemn him. She painted the picture of a man trying to rebuild his life quietly, without spectacle, who had returned not to reclaim wealth or power but to be present for the daughter he never knew. Caroline took notes, thanked her, and promised that if she wrote anything, Lauren would see it first. 3 weeks passed before the article was published. Lauren found the link in her inbox one rainy evening and clicked it with trembling hands. But the piece wasn't what she expected. It wasn't a smear. It was honest, restrained, even compassionate. It spoke of loss and recovery, of fractured timelines and second chances. It described Alex not as a fallen mogul, but as a man who had once shaped empires and was now learning how to braid his daughter's hair. It didn't name Emma. It didn't name Lauren. It ended with a single quote, one Lauren had offered without realizing its weight at the time: "Some families take longer to find each other. That doesn't mean they're any less real." The article went viral, but not for the reasons Lauren had feared. People responded not with scorn, but with empathy. Stories poured in from others who had experienced amnesia, family separation, long-lost reunions. It wasn't a scandal. It was a story of healing. And something shifted after that. People stopped whispering. Strangers smiled at Alex when they saw him with Emma in the grocery store. One of Emma's classmates brought her a drawing of a superhero dad who had come back from nowhere. The principal at her school sent Lauren a message simply saying, "We're here if you need anything. You're doing great." One evening, as the first snow of winter fell, Lauren stood on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching Alex and Emma decorate the tiny tree they'd bought together. Emma was humming under her breath, standing on her tiptoes to reach the top branches. Alex knelt beside her, holding the string of lights like it was the most precious thing in the world. And Lauren felt something settle deep inside her, not peace, exactly, but a kind of quiet acceptance. Their story hadn't started the way it should have. It had broken in the middle. But they had picked up the pieces. And somehow, through every painful twist, they had ended up here, not where they began, but exactly where they were meant to be. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, knowing now, truly, that they were going to be okay. This story, at its heart, is about the quiet strength of survival, the fragility of forgiveness, and the miracle of second chances. What makes the ending truly powerful is not just the reunion of a broken family, but the emotional earnestness of it. No one was saved by a miracle, and nothing was fixed overnight. Instead, healing came in small, almost invisible steps, showing up when it hurt, listening when it was easier to walk away, choosing love even after the world had offered every reason not to. Lauren's resilience never turned bitter. She remained protective, but not hardened. That nuance made her believable. And Alex, for all his faults and past silence, didn't try to erase what had happened. He simply stepped into the life that had formed without him and asked, humbly, if there was still room. Emma, the heart of it all, remained a beacon of purity, offering trust where others would hesitate, proving that sometimes children are the bravest among us. The ending doesn't scream. It breathes. It gives us hope not because everything is perfect, but because the people in it are finally safe to be imperfect, together. That's what makes it shocking in the best way, not the return from the dead, not the press scandals, but the fact that despite it all, love found a way back. And stayed.